To my sister's engagement dinner, the laughter wasn't joy, it was at me. Jessica raised her glass, leaned on her fiancé's arm, and smirked. She just pushes papers downtown, she announced, her voice slicing through the clink of champagne. My mother sighed. My father adjusted his tie. Heat crawled up my neck as the chandelier spotlighted my humiliation. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stayed silent, steady, unbroken. What they didn't know was that before dessert hit the table, everything would flip. Keep watching, because the night Jessica thought belonged to her was about to become mine. I should probably tell you who I am before you decide what to think of me. My name is Ava Hart. I'm 32. To my family, I'm the practical daughter, the safe one, the one who never took risks or shined too brightly. My father is a surgeon used to being introduced with pride. My mother runs a gallery, always in pearls, always curating appearances. And Jessica, my younger sister, was the golden child from the start. The model, the beauty, the one who filled rooms with noise and glitter. I grew up in her shadow. At Christmas, she got the designer bag while I got a planner. At birthdays, she blew out candles while I cleared plates. I was the one who remembered things, who stayed late, who made sure the lights were off. "You're steady," my mother would say, her voice dipped in disappointment. Not everyone can be ambitious. I used to wonder what ambition looked like to her. Was it a new car? A Vogue spread, a fiancé who managed hedge funds? Jessica ticked all those boxes. She was the one paraded around at dinner parties. I was the afterthought, the placeholder, the girl at the edge of family photos. But let me be clear, I was never the weak one. I learned early that silence could be sharper than any retort. I learned that while they mocked me, I could watch. And while I watched, I built. Still, that didn't make nights like this easier. Sitting at that long table, white linen crisp under my hands, champagne fizzing in my glass, I could feel how little space I occupied in my own family. My father talked about his latest surgery like it was a miracle. My mother bragged about the gallery's newest show. Jessica fluttered around the table, dropping names and flashing her ring, making sure every stranger knew how important she was. When the conversation turned to careers, Jessica acted as if she'd been elected spokesperson. Dad's the surgeon. Mom runs the gallery. I'm in fashion, obviously. She flipped her hair, grinning wide. Then her eyes found mine. And Ava. She just pushes papers downtown. Nothing exciting. Laughter again, polite but sharp enough to cut. I smiled, though my throat ached. I'd trained myself not to flinch. My mother added, "She's always been the practical one. Not everyone can be bold." The words settled heavy like they always did. Small cuts that left scars no one could see. What they didn't know, what no one in that room cared to know, was that 3 months earlier, the world had already started shifting in my direction. 3 months before that dinner, Jessica had borrowed my car. She always borrowed things, closed jewelry time, without asking. That morning, I was standing in the parking lot of my apartment building at 6:30 sharp, waiting for her to bring it back. By 7:15, she finally pulled up, unapologetic iced coffee in hand, sunglasses, perched on her nose like she was stepping off a runway. "Sorry about the mess," she said, tossing me the keys. Coffee stains streaked across the passenger seat. The gas tank was empty. She smirked. "It's just a Toyota Ava. Not like you're trying to impress anyone." I didn't answer. I drove straight to my meeting, already late, already running through numbers in my head. That morning, I closed a deal worth $2 million in funding, but no one at home cared to ask. Jessica never even wondered how the rest of my day went. That was the pattern. At Christmas, she ripped through designer boxes while I opened a single leather planner. She laughed, turning to our cousins. "A work planner." "God, how boring are you?" I ran my fingers over the embossed cover, smiling quietly. That planner would hold the notes for the biggest deal of my career, but to them, it was proof that I was dull. 2 weeks before her engagement dinner, she called me at 2 in the morning. Not to check on me, not because she cared. She needed her resume fixed. "You're good with that office stuff," she slurred, drunk from another cocktail party. "Make it perfect by tomorrow afternoon." When I told her I had an early meeting I couldn't miss, she snapped. "It's not like your job matters, Ava. This is Vogue. Actual important people will see this." So I stayed up until 4 editing her resume, fixing every sloppy line while she slept it off. The next morning, I walked into a boardroom with 2 hours of sleep facing directors who would finalize a global acquisition strategy. My voice was steady even as my hands shook from exhaustion. The vote passed. Our plan was approved. Jessica never knew. Then came the bridal shower. I offered to help, thinking maybe we could share a moment. Instead, she announced to her friends as they arrived, "Ava can handle the decorations and cleanup. She's great with organizing papers." More laughter, sideways glances, pitying smiles. While I rearranged flowers, I approved wire transfers on my phone numbers, worth more than any handbag she unwrapped that day. By the time the engagement dinner approached, I'd stopped expecting respect. The night before, I found my black dress missing, borrowed without permission, returned with a wine stain at the sleeve. "You wouldn't have worn it anyway." Jessica shrugged. "Not like you get invited to important events." I slipped into my navy dress instead, the same one I'd worn the day I signed the Mercer deal. The irony didn't escape me. Neither did the certainty growing inside me. The cracks in their perfect picture were forming, and soon the whole frame would collapse. The morning of the engagement dinner, I ironed the navy dress and laid out a pair of simple pearl earrings. They weren't new, not flashy, but I liked how they caught the light without demanding attention. As I smoothed the fabric, I felt that strange mix of dread and calm that had followed me for years. I knew what the evening would bring: Jessica's show, my parents' approval, the same tired script where I was the quiet shadow at the table. Only this time, something had shifted. By then, Blackwood Partners had already become a storm gathering behind closed doors. I had spent years keeping it invisible, meetings in offices my family never visited, phone calls. I excused myself to take outside documents, passed quietly across tables with people whose names my mother couldn't even pronounce. Every time I stayed silent at a family dinner, I was negotiating. Every time I smiled through an insult, I was signing. But carrying that secret wasn't easy. There were nights I came home too exhausted to eat, dropping my purse by the door and collapsing onto the couch, heels still on. I'd stare at the ceiling, asking myself why I cared so much. Why did I still want my mother's approval, my father's pride, my sister's respect? And yet I did. That ache never left. My mentor, Elaine, used to say, "Let them underestimate you. Power is quieter that way." Her voice echoed in my head that night as I zipped the navy dress. She was right. I didn't need them to know. Not yet. At the restaurant, La Cirque glowed like a jewel box. Crisp white linens, candles in crystal holders, waiters gliding like shadows. Jessica thrived in that kind of place center of attention spotlight, chasing her every laugh. She flitted from cousin to cousin, dragging Thomas along like a prize on display. I hung back, blending into the edges the way I always did. My parents arrived late, as always. My father launched into a story about a complicated surgery. My mother adjusted her pearls, sipping wine with the elegance she loved to perform. I listened quietly, tasting the bitterness of champagne more than the sweetness. The first cracks showed when Thomas leaned toward me during appetizers. "So, what do you actually do?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. For a moment, the table fell silent. Jessica's smile tightened. My mother's eyes flicked to me, wary. One word I said softly, placing my fork down: "Acquisitions." The silence that followed stretched longer than expected. Jessica laughed nervously, filling the space. "She means admin, filing schedules, office stuff." But Thomas's father, seated 2 chairs down, tilted his head. His eyes narrowed in recognition, like he had just seen a shadow move. I looked back at him steadily, my lips curving in the faintest smile. It wasn't time yet, but I knew the night was already shifting. Their stage was no longer theirs alone. Dinner moved in courses, but I barely tasted a bite. Lobster bisques, seared lamb truffle, pasta, none of it mattered. What mattered was how every laugh, every toast, every glance carried an edge that pointed at me. Jessica told story after story, pausing for applause, letting her ring catch the candlelight each time. She saved the sharpest barb for the main course. Fork in hand, her voice carried down the table. "All she does is push papers. Even my nail tech makes more than her." Laughter rippled across white linen. My mother gave her practiced sigh. My father smirked, the corners of his mouth twitching upward as if to say, "Well, it's true." I felt the heat climb up my neck, but I didn't break. I never do. I placed my fork down slowly, steady, deliberate. Thomas shifted beside her, looking at me curiously. And then his father cleared his throat. "Where did you say your office was again?" "Ava." His tone was polite, but his eyes cut sharp. "Downtown," I said evenly, "on Park Avenue." He raised a brow. "Which building? 750, I replied. That was it. Just 3 numbers. But his lips curved into the faintest smile. That address wasn't for paper pushers. That address belonged to the most elite. He knew. Jessica tried to laugh it off. "Oh, please, Dad, don't encourage her. She rents a cubicle in some admin floor," but I didn't answer. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Elaine Terms, approved. Official announcement Monday morning. My pulse slowed. The timing was perfect. Dessert arrived, but no one picked up their spoons. Thomas's father leaned closer. "Blackwood Partners. That's who's in that building. Are you—" He stopped himself, but his eyes searched mine. I gave him a small smile, a nod. That was enough. His chair creaked as he sat back stunned. Then he spoke louder so the whole table could hear, "So Ava, you work with Blackwood Partners?" Every head turned. Silence swallowed the room. I looked around the table, saw Jessica's smirk falter, my mother's wineglass trembling slightly, my father's confident posture collapse. I let them hang there for a moment before I spoke. "No," I said softly. "I don't work with them. I founded them." The chandelier hummed overhead. Even the waiters froze. Jessica's laugh was high-pitched, nervous. "Stop joking, Ava. Tell them about your admin job." But Thomas's father wasn't laughing. His voice was low, reverent. "Blackwood just acquired FinTech Global, $4.2 billion. That was you?" I nodded once. "Yes." Gasps broke around the table. My father's fork clattered to his plate. My mother's hand shot to her pearls as if clutching them would keep her world intact. Jessica stared at me, pale. "That's not... You can't... You're lying." I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and laid it on the table. The Wall Street Journal alert glowed on the screen. Sources confirm Ava Hart, CEO of Blackwood Partners, as architect of $4. 2B FinTech acquisition. Official announcement Monday. The room tilted. The balance of power shifted in an instant. Questions fired from every direction. How long? How did you build it? Are you really the one behind Mercer last year? I answered calmly, evenly. Yes, years of work, careful deals, quiet moves. My voice stayed steady, but inside I felt something loosen a knot, untied after years of silence. My father leaned forward, eyes wide, desperate now. "Why didn't you tell us?" I met his gaze. "You never asked," my mother whispered. "But you've always been ordinary." "Ordinary doesn't close billion-dollar deals," I said. Thomas's father leaned in excitement shining in his eyes. "We've been trying to get a meeting with Blackwood for months. If we'd known..." He trailed off, glancing at Jessica, then back at me. Respect. Real respect. The spotlight had turned. Jessica's engagement dinner had become my unveiling. The more questions they asked, the smaller she became in her own celebration. Her hand trembled as she clutched Thomas's arm. "Don't listen to her. She's just pretending." Thomas pulled away slightly. His eyes locked on me. "She's not pretending. She's the one we've been trying to partner with." The table erupted again, but not with laughter, with awe, with the heavy weight of realization. For the first time, I let myself enjoy it. I watched Jessica shrink in her seat, her voice failing, her face pale. My parents sat in stunned silence, the image of their family cracked wide open. When the evening wound down, we waited outside for our cars. The cold air cut against my skin, but I felt warm, alive. Jessica grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Her voice shook between anger and fear. I looked at her steady. "You never wanted to know. You were too busy telling everyone who you thought I was." Her eyes filled with tears. "But we're sisters." "Yes," I said softly. "And that should have been enough for you to see me, the real me." The valet pulled up my car, not the Toyota she'd trashed months before, but the black Mercedes I'd bought after the Mercer deal. Jessica's mouth fell open. She scrambled. "At least let me introduce you at the wedding, my sister, the genius. Please." I shook my head, stepping into the car. "I have a board meeting in Tokyo that week. Some admin work I can't miss." The door shut. Her face blurred behind the glass as I pulled away, the city lights reflecting off the hood of my car. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt unshakable. I drove home that night with the city lights flickering across my windshield. For years, those lights had looked cold, unreachable, like they belonged to someone else's story. But now they felt different, like they were reflecting back at me, finally recognizing me. The silence in my apartment was the kind I'd once hated. Empty rooms, unanswered calls, holidays spent alone while my family toasted Jessica. But that night, the quiet felt powerful. I poured a glass of wine, set my phone on the counter, and watched as the notifications kept coming. Partners congratulating me, reporters asking for quotes, investors begging for meetings. Meanwhile, my family's texts began trickling in. My father, "We should talk soon." My mother, "Proud of you, Ava. Always have been." Jessica, of course, went silent. For the first time in her life, she didn't have words. The fallout was swift. By Monday morning, the press release went public. Headlines named me one of the youngest female CEOs to ever close a multi-billion-dollar deal. Blackwood Partners was everywhere. And my parents. They had to answer questions at their own dinner parties this time about me. I didn't rush to see them. I didn't rush to forgive them either. The years of silence, the pitying smiles, the casual cruelty, they didn't vanish just because they suddenly realized who I was. Respect handed out late isn't respect at all. But I wasn't bitter, not really. What I felt was something heavier, sharper relief. They could laugh, sneer, underestimate all they wanted. It no longer touched me, because success doesn't need their approval. And Jessica. Her perfect engagement story was no longer the only headline in the family. She had wanted the night to be hers forever. Instead, she would spend the rest of her life remembering how easily it slipped away. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Success doesn't need applause, and power doesn't need noise. It waits, it builds, and when the moment comes, it speaks louder than any insult ever could. My family wanted me to stay small so they could shine brighter. Instead, I stayed silent, worked harder, and let the truth reveal itself when it mattered most. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been dismissed by the people who should have believed in you, most remember this: their opinion doesn't define your worth. Keep building quietly. Keep proving them wrong. And if my story resonates with you, hit subscribe, share your story in the comments, and stay tuned for the next one.